Good afternoon and welcome to Aurora Connects, Season 3, Episode 13, the season finale for Thursday, July 22nd, 2021, Corrina Gould. I'm Associate Artistic Director, Dawn Monique Williams, and as always, I am joined by Artistic Director, Josh Costello. Hey, Josh.
Hey, Dawn. When you say season finale, it makes it sound like there's going to be some big dramatic twist coming. Some cliffhanger.
There will be lots of cliffhangers. Well, we are changing date and time once again. So we will return. We will be back with a fourth season of Aurora Connects, and we will return in about a month's time on Friday. We're moving back to Fridays, August 20th at 5 p.m. And we are switching to a monthly format with what we hope to be a quarterly town hall. So when we rejoin you next month, August 20th, Friday at 5 p.m., that episode of Aurora Connects will be a special 90-minute interactive episode where we are inviting audience to join us in the Zoom room. You will find information about how to register for that on our website, auroratheater.org. I just threw it up for you right there. So we will be so excited to have you join us for Porch Stories in this town hall immersive conversation. We'll be in conjunction with our first production, Dale Orlando Smith's Stoop Stories, directed by Elizabeth Carter.
Yeah, and we're partnering with Susan Moffett of the Future Histories Lab at UC Berkeley. It's going to be a really great conversation about urban planning and gentrification and stories about neighborhoods and how the story of a neighborhood comes to be.
Exactly. So we're really excited for you to join us for that. So check it out. Today, I will be here with Josh live to get us started. We are then going to play a pre-recorded interview that I did with Corrina Gould, but I will be here staffing the chat the entire time. So please do continue to drop comments in. I'm monitoring Facebook and YouTube and Twitch. We do have a Twitch TV, friends. So I'm here, so chat me. I love when that happens. If you're not able to do that and you're watching this at a replay or a later date, feel free to email us at connects@auroratheater.org. That's connects@auroratheater.org. Like I said, we're starting a new format for our fourth season. We'd love your input and feedback, who and what you'd like to see on the show.
And we are going to this new format because we are starting our 30th anniversary season at Aurora Theater Company. I'm so excited about this season. We are so looking forward to being back in our space and welcoming you back into our space at some point. Our first show will be on video. That is Stoop Stories, which Dawn mentioned, by Dale Orlando Smith, but subscriptions are on sale now. You can go to auroratheater.org to purchase a subscription. And while you're there, you can also click the donate button at the top right and help get us through this ongoing, seemingly never-ending crisis time. But we're in good shape to start this season. I'm so excited, so grateful to everybody who's helped us make it this far. And we've got a great lineup of 5 shows that you can read about on our website.
And Josh, we have something special coming up, our last cabaret of the season. You want to tell folks what they could check out?
Sure. Yeah. So we did a membership program this season, and one of the things that we offer for our members is a series of cabaret performances. And this is an online performance, live performance by the Kilbanes, who, if you do not know the Kilbanes, they are awesome. They're a rock band and a theater group, and they do all kinds of great stuff there. That is a photo from Weightless, which is the musical that they performed with Z Space and ACT and lots of places, and that was recorded on the Bruns at Cal Shakes. But they're going to be doing a live performance, I believe, from their living room for you, the Aurora audience. It's free for members and a small ticket price for non-members. You can go to auroratheater.org and click on tickets at the top right to get your ticket to the Kilbanes. And I think we're going to get a little taste of the Kilbanes now.
Yes, just to whet folks' appetite. So in our last episode, we played a charming little introduction video from the Kilbanes, but it played upside down. So I'm gonna just play their little intro video. You'll hear them mention the song that they had recorded for us for our last episode. We're not playing that song again. We're playing a different song from the same musical. So here we go.
Hello, wonderful Aurora audience.
Hello.
We're the Kilbanes. I'm Kate.
I'm Dan.
And we're so honored to get to talk to you today and offer you a little something from us to you in this moment. We are so thrilled that in July, we actually get to give a concert for Aurora. And Josh Costello has said we can do whatever we want. And so what we're going to do is we've been working on a bunch of different projects. And the thing we have missed most during this time is the chance to try out brand new material with audiences so that we can figure out what's working and what we still want to continue working on. So that's what we're going to do in July. We're going to play you a bunch of brand new songs from a bunch of different projects, and we'll give you a little context and tell you some stories. And we hope that it'll be sort of an infusion of energy for you, and we know it'll be massively helpful to us. So we're super, super excited about it. And on that note, we made a little video for you, a little preview, if you will, of a song called Out of Time, which is from a show that we're working on called Eddie the Marvelous Who Will Save the World. We hope you enjoy.
The fire burns forever down below on the desert sand. The smoke is blackening the sky. I'm alone and I'm the reason why. Look away, but I'll see it for eternity. All my life fading into dust, with my eyes adjusting to the dark, and my hands as empty as my heart as it falls apart. Make a wish, strike a match, fire burn into ash. I can't return, can't go back, slipping through the cracks. Let it go, let it pass. Alone in the shadows of my memory, all the things that I could not see, now they're clear and bright as any star. But it doesn't matter anymore. Can't change the score. Make a wish, strike a match, fire burn into ash. Can't return, can't go back, slipping through the cracks. Let it go, let it pass, and the galaxies are run. Every mystery in love, but they'll all just fade away in time. Make a wish, strike a match, fire burns into ash. I can't return, I can't go back, slipping through the cracks. Let it go, let it pass.
Yes, that was Make a Wish by the Kilbanes featuring Reggie D. White, one of my greatest loves.
That was really, really lovely. And always great to see Reggie.
Always great to see Reggie.
Yeah. So again, you can join us for our live stream of the Kilbanes as the final cabaret of our 2020-2021 season on July 31st, and tickets are available at auroratheater.org. So now let's talk about Corrina Gould.
Yes, let's do it.
Yeah. So Corrina, I'm so excited that we have Corrina on the show. She's just an amazing individual. Corrina is the tribal spokesperson for the Confederated Villages of Lisjan, which includes Huichin on the land colonially known as Berkeley and Oakland. She's the co-director for the Sogorea Te Land Trust, which is a woman-led organization within the urban setting of her ancestral territory of the Bay Area that works to return Indigenous land to Indigenous people. Corrina has worked on preserving and protecting the ancient burial sites of her ancestors, including the West Berkeley Shellmound, which we'll talk about in a little bit, throughout the Bay Area for decades. And she's, again, just a lovely person and is doing really amazing, important work in the Bay Area. And we're so grateful to her for coming on the show.
And I just want to add the note that this interview was recorded on May 14th. And there have been a lot of developments in Native American country, both in the United States and Canada and Hawaii. So just naming that, we know there have been some new developments that are deeply impacting Native, Aboriginal, Indigenous populations. And this interview in no way disregards those things. We simply recorded 2 months ago. So with that, I'm going to roll into the interview.
Here we go.
I would love to just sort of jump right in and have you speak a little bit about the Sogorea Te Land Trust and tell us more about what that is and the work you all are doing to restore Ohlone lands.
Oh, thank you for that question, Dawn. Sogorea Te Land Trust is a dream come true, I think. You know, as an Ohlone woman in my territory, we're not a federally recognized tribe, and we are homeless in our own homeland. There's no land base for us. We've been disconnected because of private land ownership that has taken over our land. And, you know, like everybody in the Bay Area now, it's super expensive to live here. And so many of our tribal members have had to move to places that are cheaper, and those of us that are still here want to ensure that there's a connection. But the Sogorea Te Land Trust started because of the work that we were doing to preserve and protect our sacred sites in the Bay Area from a whole different organization called Indian People Organizing for Change.
Okay.
And that organization still exists. It's a grassroots organization. It's not a nonprofit. It's just people that have come together to really protect sacred sites and to do that work. And between 2005 and 2008, the Indian People Organizing for Change led shellmound walks around the Bay Area. Most people never knew what a shellmound was. In the Bay Area growing up, it's not talked about in school, although my ancestors are talked about in 4th grade. And the history is really skewed, and then we disappear altogether, right? And so, but when, and I think you'll remember during the .com era, that I call it, right? When the internet was created so that we could be in this room together today virtually, that there was this whole, and the word gentrification, right? We talk about people are massively moving. Well, in around 1998, 1999, when the internet was created in the way that we use it now, people in the Bay Area were outbidding each other for houses and apartments, and it caused this big wave of people to move out. And all this development started happening in the Bay Area, much like it is today, right? We see all of these cranes in the air, not birds, but these big metal things. And they were finding our ancestors, like at the Emeryville Shellmound, and a condominium building that was being put up in San Jose, and just multiple places whilst this development was happening. And so Janella LaRose, who is the co-founder and co-director of both Sogorea Te and Indian People Organizing for Change. We've been working together for over 25 years. It was really about trying to put on the map again these sacred places that are hidden in all of this built up urban setting, to remind people that Ohlone people exist, to remind us that, you know, that we have an obligation to protect our sacred sites and to stop the destruction from happening. And then in 2011, working with our good friend and elder, Miwok elder, Wounded Knee de Ocampo, who grew up in Vallejo 11 years prior, was trying to stop the development of 2 shell mounds on the last 13 acres of open space on the Carquinez Strait. And that is a village site of our ancestors called Sogorea Te. And in 2011, 10 years ago now, we took over a sacred site, that sacred site, where the city of Vallejo was filing bankruptcy. And in filing bankruptcy, gave the park district $30,000 in permits for free to destroy the site. And so after all of those years of organizing people, going to city council and park district meetings, getting thousands of people from all over the world to ask them not to do this, doing shell mound walks together to educate the people in the Bay Area and around the world. When we found this out, we all together at the same time said, we just have to go and take it over. And so for 109 days, we took that land back, and that land really took care of us in a bunch of different ways. So we lit a sacred fire. Fred Short, who is the Northern California spiritual advisor for the American Indian movement and a friend of ours for many years, came and he lit that sacred fire that stayed lit for that 109 days. And we had fires from 4 different places in different parts of the world that stayed lit as long as our fire stayed lit. And so there were people that were watching what was going to happen at this site. And people from all walks of life came together and built this village, much like the village we must have had years and years ago, right? It was one of the last strongholds for my ancestors. It was one of the last villages that they were pulled out of before being taken into the missions. And we prayed at those fires, and we had ceremony there, and people cooked there and lived there together and really learned how to live interdependently again. And like Janella says, it's like we went there thinking that we were going to save this land, and the land actually saved us.
Yes.
It reminded us how to be human beings again, and how to stand for something, and how to protect the sacred. And when we left there after 109 days, the first cultural easement was created between a city, a park district, and 2 federally recognized tribes. And it gave those tribes the same rights as the city and the park district on that land. So this is so because of our stand and our prayerful takeover of this land, that was created so that no one entity could change the land without the other two's approval. So that kind of protects it forever. And we left thinking that we had won, and had a big celebration. And a few months later in October, we left in July of 2011, July 31st. In October, we went back, and they had destroyed a lot of things that we had not wanted them to do. And the tribes had signed a contract with the city saying that no more than 10 natives would ever gather there, and there would be no big drums. And we were angry about that until we realized that that wasn't us that signed the contract. And so we show up every year with hundreds of people and have ceremony and do what we're supposed to do, our obligations to that land, and work with another non-federally recognized tribe, the Winnemem Wintu, to bring salmon back up the Shasta. And the salmon come up through our bay and up the Carquinez Strait and up to the rivers where they're born to. And so it's our responsibility as salmon people to pray them in when they're coming home. And so we do that work together. And so that's a beautiful connection with that. But your question was about Sogorea Te. So Sogorea Te came out of that because we realized that had we had a tool, that this tool would have given us the opportunity to be in relationship with the city and the park district to create this cultural easement. That and that we didn't know that this was a tool that we needed. And it wasn't until after we left that was true. Our good friend Beth Rose Middleton is a professor at UC Davis. She did her PhD work at UC Berkeley, and she wrote a book called Trust in the Land. And the book is specifically about native land trusts. And at that time, there were only a handful of native land trusts in the country. And she invited me to a meeting in Southern California, probably about 6 months after we left Sogorea Te. And I had the ability to meet different tribal people in California that were literally buying back their sacred lands. And some people just were non-federally recognized, and they had long-term lease on 1 acre of their land so they could tell their story. And so we began to see that there's a different way of bringing back and protecting our sacred sites, and that this was perhaps the tool that we needed. The other thing that we did while we were doing those walks was we stopped at each of these shell mounds along the way, and we prayed where they had been, now covered with asphalt or parking lots or schools or buildings or streets, reminding the ancestors that we remembered them so that they could remember us. And also, it was important because UC Berkeley holds over 9,000 of our ancestral remains.
Oh, wow.
Many of the institutions in the Bay Area hold our ancestral remains, and the prayer was to bring them back home, that these ancestors needed to be brought back into the earth. But also, as a non-federally recognized tribe, homeless in our own homeland, we had nowhere to bring them back to. Imagine if UC Berkeley was to say, here, almost 10,000 people that we've taken out of the ground now need to be returned. Where would we put them at? So we needed to create a land base. We have to figure out how to do that, right? How do we do that so that they come back home? And so a land trust was a way of doing that. It was the dream. The dream started when I went to this meeting. But what I've noticed when I was at this meeting was that it was all men that were at this meeting. There was a few women that were support staff to the men, right? And so I met this incredible Alaskan Native guy, Dune Lankard, and he saved over 140,000 acres of his traditional territory in Alaska after the Exxon Valdez spill. And had a difficult time doing it. He's an incredible story, Dune, and folks should look him up. He's got an incredible story about that. But I asked my new friend about this when we were having lunch one day. I said, is this kind of a boys' club? And he laughed about it, and he said, yeah, kind of. And not just native land trusts, but land trusts across the country are predominantly run by men. And so when I brought this information back to Janella, we had this conversation. I said, I think this is a tool we could use, a tool that we had no idea what a land trust was. But it looked like a tool that we could use to actually begin to buy back or to get land back into Indigenous hands. But I told her about the Boys Club story, and her and I began to talk about the time we're in right now in this world, when we're looking at climate disaster happening. We're looking at the different wars that continue to happen on the lands. We're looking at the extraction that's happening in the land. We have to begin to look back at the beginning. What happened that human beings were taken away from the land, that we begin to think of ourselves as apart from the land, as different than being a part of the land. Yeah. So, and how it all kind of went sideways that way. And we begin to look at, as the colonization happened across the world, that the first thing that happened was the desecration of the sacred, the taking away of women's power, the extraction of not just the lands, but of women's bodies, and how this correlates to the ongoing violence that happens in this world, and what it means to take our rightful place as women in leadership. And when we began to look at, even during COVID, what happened in the world when women were in leadership, how much the people in those places were better taken care of, how folks were, because it's our responsibility to take care of everybody. When we begin to take, as Indigenous women, we have the stories and the songs for the waters and the basket making materials and the medicines. That's our relationship. That we bury our children's umbilical cords in the land that they're born to, so that connection remains. That it's our responsibility to bring both life in and to help them to leave this earth when it's time for them to go. And that this is incredible, strong work of Indigenous women across the world. And that we needed to take that back to bring balance back into the world, so that we could stop this horrible extraction that continues to happen, and that we can ensure that there's fresh water and that there are these things in place for the next 7 generations. And so Sogorea Te Land Trust was built on that foundation of women, Indigenous women leadership. And Sogorea Te Land Trust sits on my home territory, territory that we have been connected to since the beginning of time. And I'm blessed to be here to be able to speak to being connected to our lands and our waterways, and to invite people that now live in our territories to be a part of this work with us. But it's not an Ohlone, it's not a Lisjan Ohlone land trust. It's an Indigenous women-led land trust. We have Indigenous women from Brazil and from Yaqui territories, Navajos and Pacific Islanders, and all of these women, and a few of the men that are working with us.
Yeah.
Because we can't throw away our brothers, our sons, our grandsons, our nephews. But when colonization happened, something happened to them as well. Their roles and responsibilities was taken away from them. And so to bring that balance, they have to be brought back into what does that look like? And so looking at that, looking at the different tribes that were brought into the Bay Area as part of the forced relocation policies of the United States government, in hopes that assimilation would happen and that there would be a mixture of people, so that the blood quantum of Native people would go down and erase them. That part of the assimilation process also brought all of these Native people into the Bay Area, onto my territory.
Yes.
3-4 generations now, right, of people that have not been able to go back home, but needs to make a home here. And what does that mean as a responsibility of us, is to ensure that there are places that people can go to and that they have access to traditional ways of being, ways of us to work the land so our medicines come back that are, and we know as, human beings, that it's, that the land heals us. That when we have connection to the land, that it helps us physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And so, yes. And so and that's a proven scientific fact. Right. So it's not something that's, I always laugh about, all of these things that our ancestors taught us, it's not true unless, Western science says it's true. And so they're finally catching up with us,
Yes.
which is good.
Yes, it was true before there was Western science.
Yeah. They're finally catching up in some ways. And so, we invite, so the Sogorea Te Land Trust is really about that. It's about looking at reconnecting our cultural values, working with the Ohlone tribe
Mhm.
in order to bring back song and ceremony and language back to the land, because when that health happens, then the health of everybody else is improved as well. And so also looking at what our responsibility is as Indigenous people to be good hosts on our land to our guests, and how to work with guests in good ways. And so the land trust was really created to begin to have those places. We have a place, our first piece of land was given back to us in 250 years, a 1/4 acre of land that's on 105th Avenue. And for those of you that aren't from the Bay Area that might be listening, 105th Avenue is probably as deep as you can get in Oakland.
Mhm.
And when we say deep, it doesn't necessarily mean a good thing, because these are forgotten communities here.
I
And
live at 77th Ave.
all right, I
Yeah.
live 100. I live right on 100 off 106, so I'm out here.
So I know exactly what you're saying when these are forgotten communities.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a piece of Oakland that doesn't get a lot of attention, and a lot of our community members that are here are like that. They're marginalized. They don't have as many opportunities as other places, and so, but this place in East Oakland called Planting Justice, which is a nonprofit organic nursery that works with formerly incarcerated men and women and gives them good paying jobs when they are able to get out from those walls, work with them while they're in San Quentin and Folsom and other places, to train them and able to people that are in the community that are migrant folks and folks that need to have good paying jobs, often will work there. But the two young people, and I'd say they're young because they're in their 30s, they went to Standing Rock a few years ago. And those folks that don't know what Standing Rock was, it was this movement to stop a oil pipe from going underneath a river that crossed native lands. And thousands and thousands of people from all walks of life and across the world came to stand in solidarity to make sure that didn't happen. These two people went out there from Planting Justice, Gavin and Hale, and they run Planting Justice, and they were so moved by that happening. They asked elders in that community at Standing Rock what they should do when they came home, and the elders told them they should work with the First Nation people on whose land they're on. And they took that to heart. And they had an Athabascan elder working with them, Diane Williams, and she said, I need to put you in touch with Janella and Corrina. And a few months later, we were sitting under a California walnut tree, and they offered on this 2-acre piece of land. They said, we're not using this 1/4 acre of land, and we would like to return it to you. And so it runs along the Lisjan Creek, who our tribe is named after. It's a 1/2-mile walk from my house. And so I always say that these ancestors are incredible tricksters and love us so much that they wanted to gift us this incredible place that was probably on a village site or close to one. And we have been able in the last few years to put up the first arbor in our territory, which is a place where we dance and welcome people into our territory. First time in 250 years.
Wow.
We've also created hugels and places where we're growing our own medicines, and we have a container that we've built out that has fresh water tanks. We have a rain catchment system. We have first aid there, food. We've created an outdoor kitchen because we want this to be a place where people can go. And when what Janella says is, our land there is in a place where no one's going to come to save us, if it's a man-made or a natural-made disaster. And as part of our responsibility as good hosts, we want to make sure that there is a touchstone, a place where people can go to in times of need, and that we take care of our guests and our community in that kind of a way. So we're hoping to put up solar panels soon, and there'll be other things that people will be able to have access to those places in times of disasters. We have a place in West Oakland called Ramai, and Ramai in our language means west, and where it's a community garden that we have a long-term lease on. It has 13 fruit trees, and we have planter boxes there, and we're hoping to open it up to the community to begin to grow good food, because West Oakland is a food desert, and people need to have access to good places to grow their own food. And so we want to open that up to the community. We're working with doing COVID relief and giving food out once a week to people that, since COVID began, that are immunosuppressed or elderly or have small children or are working the front lines. We have a working relationship with the Giltrack in Albany. And so really beginning to look at this checkerboard way of seeing the land and creating places and spaces for people to engage in the land with us, a way for us to offer that space, a way for us to have ceremony and bring back language and song, a way for us to not have to have outside interference when we do that. Because even though a lot of people will say, oh, East Bay Parks has, all of this land. Well, we don't have access to that land. Yeah, we don't have access to harvest our own foods. And so really working with cities now in the Bay Area to create those spaces that we do have access to do that. And so we've been creating relationships with cities all along and those just recently started happening a lot more in the last 6 months. We've been reached out to by the city of Pinole and El Cerrito, Albany, have a working relationship with the city of Berkeley now because of the work that we've been doing around the West Berkeley Shellmound. So yeah, Sogorea Te is growing, and we're going to have a youth program beginning either the fall or winter. And so we're excited about that and bringing young people to the land. Yeah.
That's so rich. I wonder if you would just help viewers who might not be familiar with a couple of terms that you used.
Oh, yeah.
Federally recognized, and then also blood quantum, and how these things historically have created greater problems and divisions for Native communities by virtue of policing Native identities.
Thank you so much. That's a difficult question to answer because our public school system does such a poor job in explaining any of these laws that were created for Native American people and the United States government. And the laws of, first of all, there's federal recognition. So American Indian people are the only people in this country that have to prove who they say that they are, right? If you're Filipino and you say you're Filipino, you're Filipino. If you're Irish, you're Irish. If anybody. Yeah. But American Indians have to prove who they say they are. It's because of the treaties that were created between the United States government and sovereign nations, right? And these treaties often will give the tribes a land base, and there are other obligations by the United States government to those tribal people. Education, infrastructure, schooling, medical itself, right? And you think, oh, that would be really great. Oh, it would be really great, except that, some people that live on reservations, the clinic or the hospital might be over 100 miles away. And so the inability to actually get there to use those services are often difficult. People don't realize there on some reservations, there are places where there are no running water and there's no electricity. And so people still live like that today, having to haul their water from wells many miles away. But those are not the things that we see today inside of when the United States government, so part of the way that the United States government wanted to be done with its obligation of tribal people is to use this this idea of blood quantum, right? In order to be a tribal member, you had to be at least a quarter blood. So it doesn't matter if your parents were both full-blood Native people, but if they were from different tribes, you could only be registered in one tribe. So that would make you only half,
Yes.
right? If you married somebody else that was from a different tribe, both of you, you're still full-blooded Indian, but you're only registered as half, right? And as it goes, if you marry somebody that's outside of the tribe that you're registered in, then your children that you create are only a quarter blood. And then if your children marry somebody that's outside of that tribe, even if they married another Native person, your children become less than a quarter blood, therefore no longer Native. And so it's a way of erasure by blood quantum. They try to do this with African slaves as well, and were not successful in doing that, but they continue to do that as a way of creating continuous genocide on Native people. And some tribes have adopted different ways now of ensuring that their tribal members are able to stay enrolled even if they fall below a blood quantum, because they were forced, tribes were forced in the 1950s to adopt a city-like government structure. Those were never structures that were created by tribes. They were forced upon Native tribes in order to get federal funding, so people wouldn't starve to death on the reservations. They were forced to create these these city-like government structures. And in most recent times, many of those tribal entities have created different kinds of ways of enrolling tribal members, so that it doesn't necessarily need to be blood quantum. And other tribes continue to use the blood quantum method. And so it really depends. There are over 500 tribes that are federally recognized in the United States. There are over 180 tribes that are trying to get re-recognized. And you have to prove 7 different criteria in order to be re-recognized. In California, by the time the United States government moved all the way west, they weren't about creating treaties with California natives. It was extermination policies. And so it was very different, the colonization that happened here in California. Since that time, we look along this coast of California where the missions were created. From San Diego to Sonoma, there were 21 missions that were created. Virtually none of those tribes are federally recognized that were pulled into that. And, you know, we look at the land today, it's the richest land in the country along the coast of California. And people ask, well, why aren't you federally recognized? Well, we had recognition up until about 1924, and there was a man that was in charge of the Bureau of Indian Affairs in California named Dorrington. And Dorrington was an alcoholic. And he was asked by the federal government to find how much money was going to be needed to buy land for the homeless Indians. And he refused to do his work and was finally sent a telegram asking him to answer their question, or he would be asked to come to Washington, D.C. to answer there. And so he quickly penned a letter back and said that for virtually all California Native people in this area were culturally extinct, and so therefore there was no money needed to purchase land for the Indians here. So the federal government stopped speaking to the tribes. We never legally were unrecognized, but it was because of that one, that particular person's writing. And then we have people like Kroeber, whose name came off of a wall in UC Berkeley recently, who wrote the California Native American Handbook, and wrote inside of that specifically that we were culturally extinct. And so these continuous genocide through paper and through people that had positions of power without speaking to tribal people has been problematic. The other problematic thing about federal recognition is like, well, why don't you just apply? Except that we have to prove without a doubt that we have been running as a city-like government since the 1920s, that we have enrollment stuff, that we have cultural, but there was 3 waves of genocide that continue to happen in California. We were first colonized by the Spanish mission period. then the Mexican Rancho period, and then the extermination period of the United States government. And so how do you, as you're running from genocide after genocide, keep all of these documents in place? So when they set up the process for federal recognition, they did not take into consideration the difficulties that California natives have because of the different ways of genocide that happened here. And so it really is a racist process to do that. It's almost impossible for any California native that have been pulled into the missions to prove that they are a tribe according to that criteria. And so I realized many years ago that my work is to actually just do the culture, to bring back the land and to bring back the ancestors and to do that work. And at some point, maybe the next generation might want to deal with that process. But as of now, if we put all of our eggs in that basket, we would cease to exist, and we don't have that time.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I'm born and raised in California, and like you said, it's just that little bit of time in the 4th grade, where you learn about, Native Americans, American Indians, and, you learn about abalone, and you make a pine cone basket from the needles, but nobody's talking about the genocide and the way that Native identities are policed, and how that further puts people at a disadvantage. So thank you for sharing that. I know it's a hard question to answer. I'm really curious. You used the term guest a few times, and how part of the work you're doing is about being welcoming to guests. But I wonder what we can do as guests to be in right relationship with the Native Indigenous communities here, and with the land here. I know there's some big things happening down there at the West Berkeley and Emeryville Shellmounds. But even in a broader sense, what would make us better guests? How can we be better?
So I like to tell this story because I did a lot of work with 4th graders over the last decade or so. And I would ask them, where they're 9 and 10-year-olds, right?
Yeah.
I said, what is it to be a good guest? If you go to your grandma's house or you go to your best friend's house, how do you behave yourself, right? And we as adults have taught our youngers, our children, our grandchildren, our nieces and nephews, we have taught them the right answers because they know exactly what those answers are, right? They said, you don't touch things that aren't yours, right? You say thank you and please, right? You ask permission, right? You don't break things, and you don't go in people's refrigerators, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So we know that they know because we taught them how to behave themselves when they go to somebody's house, right? And how to be a good guest. But we forget as adults that we're guests in somebody else's homeland, and we don't practice the things that we've taught our children. And so how do you be a good guest? Can we just go back to the basics of asking permission, not touching things that aren't yours, not breaking things? In a short amount of time, California is new.
Yes.
Everything that we see here is only built in the last couple hundred years. It is brand new. But the waterways have been changed in such a way, the pollution of the water. We're polluting our own water that we have to drink, right? Not only us, but the 7 generations past us when we're gone have to. And so how are we a good guest if we don't clean up the mess that was made in a short amount of time? If we look at the Bay Area right now, I look at the Bay Area, I've lived here my whole life, right? And we have forever lived here. We've never left. We have an unbroken tie to this land. But you look at what's going on. I'm in Oakland now, and I have never, ever seen this many people living on the streets without a roof over their head.
Yeah.
My ancestors didn't have a concept of hunger or homelessness. That was like not even a possibility. There's like no idea, I mean, when colonization happened, they didn't have clue about a lot of things that would happen here on the land. But to think about this place as a place of abundance, right? That it still is a place of abundance. That the Bay Area has been a place of magic happening always. That there have been movements that have been created here in the Bay Area that have changed the world. That there have been technology that's been created here and ideas that were brought out of here. And I believe that was because my ancestors prayed on these lands for thousands of years, that this place is magic, that there's still an abundance here. We know that there's an abundance here financially, that there is an abundance here,
Yes.
that there is no way that there should be people living on the streets right now. And even if the city governments can't figure it out, that there are enough people with wealth that they could step forward and change this, right? That there shouldn't be that. And so to remind ourselves that we have a responsibility to ensure that we all have an abundance here and that we need to take care of each other. We forgot as human beings what it means to live interdependently with the lands and with the waters and with each other, and what our responsibilities are. And so to be good guests, how are we good guests if we're not helping each other figure this out? I can't do this by myself. Our tribe can't do this by ourselves. So we need our guests to do that work with us, to clean up these waterways, to ensure that there's good air, good soil, good water for the next 7 generations, that people have human dignity to live today, so that we could leave those prayers in the land for the next 7 generations, so that we don't have to see this, see people suffering here.
Yeah.
We have the technology and the monies to clean up the oceans if we wanted to do that, and to figure out a way for us to live in reciprocity with the land again.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And I love this, the idea of reciprocity. I will admit that when I first heard people talking about investing in indigenization, I couldn't separate that from cultural appropriation. And so I was like, well, I don't want to, like, I don't know what that means. I don't want to, do something offensive or something bad. I thought, well, I'm not Indigenous, so how do I contribute to indigenization? But I think it's all the things that you're talking about, right? Like my role as a guest and the idea of reciprocity. How can I be in a right relationship with the land that my home is on? I mean, for me, I'm also born and raised here, but neither of my parents are from here, So, I mean, I've certainly many generations of my people have been here, but not millennia, just 400 years. And so I just, I don't know if you have any thoughts for people who might be feeling afraid that they don't know what it means to like invest in indigenization and invest in that reciprocity. If you had a thought that you could share with those folks.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that Sogorea Te Land Trust offers is a way for people to invest in a different kind of way. We offer something called Shu'umi, and Shu'umi in our language means a gift. And Shu'umi is, we created with allies a platform on our website called Shu'umi Tax. And it's an honorary tax that people that live, work, or play on our lands can help to support the work of rematriation, bringing back lands to Indigenous hands. But the thing is that we don't hold off this land just for Indigenous people. We invite people to come to the lands to grow with us and to work with us and to be involved. And so when we begin to open up after COVID, we have opportunities for people to invest in their work labor if they want to come and work the lands with us, if they want to do that kind. They can return land to us. The whole hashtag, land back is not just a hashtag, it's truth. That, Alameda County is 425,000 acres of land. Ohlone people, between my home and my auntie's home, And the land that we're taking care of, because we actually don't own any land, we have less than 5 acres of that land, probably less than 3 when you put it all together. And so land is important, but it's not important for development reasons for Indigenous people. It's important for us to have access to places where we can connect again. It's important for all human beings to have a connection to land.
Absolutely.
And so returning land back to Indigenous people should not be a scary thing. It's because no one's going home. We have to learn how to live on this land together. And I think that's an important dream for us to all create together. How do we live on this land together? How do we ensure that the land is healthy to hold us up continuously? And how do we make sure that the land is better when we leave it?
That's wonderful. Yeah. Oh, it's such a gift to me to be able to spend this time with you. Corrina, maybe this will just be my last question, which is, it's been such a difficult year. COVID, racial reckoning, already, even before that, you were doing the hard work of trying to get land back and steward the land for your people and guests like myself. What is bringing you joy?
Oh, thank you for that. I mean, I think that, my grandchildren always bring me joy. I love to see them grow. I love to see them on the land. I love to hear them speaking the language. My daughter's the language carrier for the tribe. I love that even though we were in COVID, we had the opportunity to do online classes of bringing back the language. I love, it brings me joy that so many people now know that Ohlone people exist and want to work in reciprocity with us. It brings me joy that we're able to work through with people in all these different intersections, and that people begin to understand our responsibility together to stand for the sacred. And so the work has brought me a lot of joy. I think that work should bring you joy. And so I'm just blessed to be on my land still and to be able to do this work together with everybody that's here.
Yes. Oh, that's beautiful. Beautiful. So many rich things you had to say. I feel like this is just the beginning of an ongoing conversation that, because there's still so many more things that I would love to talk to you about and hear you share about.
Oh my goodness, that time with Corrina was such an inspiration. Like I said before, I had the opportunity to record that interview May 14th of this year, and a lot has transpired since then. I encourage you all to check out the links that I dropped in the various chats, and consider doing some more research of your own to see how you can be part of the solution and part of being a good steward for this land, and or a good guest. I'll remind you again that we are switching to a new date and sort of time for our season 4 of Aurora Connects. We are moving back to Fridays, Friday at 5. That begins August 20th with our immersive community conversation, porch stories. Consider this interview with Corrina just the start of place-based storytelling. That conversation will be joined by additional storytellers to unpack history and truths about Berkeley, Oakland, the East Bay, gentrification, and how we tell the stories of where we live and the land we're on. I'll remind you, subscriptions are on sale. We will be opening Stoop Stories digitally, streaming straight to you in your home starting September 3rd. And we have a 5-play season planned for you. So do visit us at auroratheater.org to check that out. And we typically do an advocacy shout out. I sprinkled those in throughout my interview with Corrina to amplify the places she named: the Sogorea Te Land Trust, Planting Justice, and Indian people organizing for change. Josh had to rush off to a fancy meeting that artistic directors have to do. So we look forward to joining you again next month. Thank you for watching. And as always, thank you for staying connected.